It's
going to be weird, a lot of Ruthie and Ruth back and forth. It's going to be
I
fun.
know. Well, what a brilliant name to have.
Happy International Women's Day, and thank you for letting us talk to you. I believe you're the Deputy Chief Executive of the Children's Hospital.
That's
Is that right?
Yeah,
Yes.
it is. Yeah, well done. Yeah.
And I feel like it's very important to talk to women that are in sort of those senior roles in trusts such as the Children's, because it sort of is very telling of the modern era and the time that we are living in now. And I'd love to get your thoughts on certain things.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah, no, I'm really pleased to talk to you, Ruthie. Thank you for taking the time.
Yeah. So, firstly, why do you think it's so important for the Sheffield Children's and the NHS as a whole to mark International Women's Day?
Yeah, I think what is interesting in the NHS is that women make up at least 75%, like nearly three-quarters of the workforce. And so, as women, there's a huge number that work within it, and so therefore I think we need to make sure that we've got a really loud voice in what we want to do and how ways of working. And the kind of movement this year for International Women's Day is all about choosing to challenge. That's one of the sort of theme of the year. And I think what's great for women in the NHS is that the louder the voice of women, then the more that we will be able to kind of work together to challenge maybe prejudice or opportunities that we might not have had in the past. And, we can work together with men and women to change things for the future as well. And what's great about International Women's Day is that it celebrates things as well as kind of challenging things for the future.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I just also want to ask, like, because in my experience of being a patient service user, whatever you want to call me, is that a lot of my sort of senior consultants, senior registrars are all men. Do you think there's many additional challenges to reaching those sorts of leadership roles, both in terms of the medical care side, but also in the roles that you do as sort of more admin chief executive type roles, leadership roles in that sense? Do you think there's any more additional challenges for you?
Yeah, I think that there are more challenges for women, and some of that is, I think, because traditionally more senior roles, whether that be in doctor type roles or in my kind of administrative more senior role, they have been held by men, and people tend to recruit within their own image as well, and I suppose that's then perhaps led through history, hasn't it, to more men being appointed into those things, and maybe having those role models that they've been able to look to and think, oh yeah, I want to do that. So I think some of the challenges for women are kind of are about how they're challenging that and thinking them for themselves. Actually, how could women be in those roles as well? Interestingly, I think that more doctors are training now as women, so there are more women coming through there. So that's really good. I think the other thing is that for my kind of role, well, and for any woman in who's working, actually, if you're choosing, there's often about choices, because you might be choosing about whether you want to have a family, and needing to take time off for children and everything, as well as your career. And so that's quite hard. There's kind of choices along the way, and that's just one example, I think, that makes it more of a challenge for women.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, in light of those sort of challenges and with your career, what does it mean to you to be both at such sort of in a senior position within the trust, but also be an empowered woman within that role as well? Is there anything that you have that's particularly poignant about being in that position and that you want to share within your job role that you do to sort of display that as part of your working everyday life?
Yeah. I'd hope that within my role it is possible to, inspire others and to see that, it's possible to be in different roles. I always like the thought of kind of being able to go beyond what people think you're capable of. And, my route into this role wasn't a traditional one. I went to university later in life, actually. I didn't go straight from school. And, I think it's great to be able to not necessarily follow a conventional or normal route, but also kind of show people that different things are possible. So I think for me, what feels important is that we have diversity of thought. So having women in my kind of roles, and other kind of reflections in terms of other characteristics like ethnicity and other things is really important, because what's really well established is that if you have that kind of diversity of thought and people on, within your team, then it brings much stronger decision making, and it also helps make better outcomes for patients. So, if we've got we're all thinking differently and bringing different ideas to the table, then you're going to be more creative, aren't you? And you're going to be thinking about what's possible. So I think it does feel really important to me. I mean, I love working for the NHS. I love working at Sheffield Children's. It feels such an amazing place to be. And it's hard work to be here, but I think it's really one that's really worthwhile and valuable.
Yeah. Another question is, because you said, I think earlier you said that it was 75% of NHS or workers are women.
Yeah.
Do you think the contribution of women within the NHS is fully recognised, considering the proportionate amount of women that are in the service? Because I know that I sort of unintentionally said a minute ago, a lot of my consultants, doctors, are men, and that's my first thought of when I think of hospital is a doctor, rather than all the other many types of roles that are within the NHS that are filled majoritively by women, if you get what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah, I do know what you mean. I think that it's getting better in terms of representation of women, but I think we've got a long way to go. And certainly women in senior posts. So one of the jobs that would be in my team, for example, that we work with, is the Director of Finance, and it's a really important role in the NHS. But only one in four, so a quarter of those are women, and that's seen as, it's a bit like medical directors. They're seen at the moment still as quite male roles, just in terms of those that are progressing into them at the moment. But of course, the more women that train into these roles, the more that, over time, we will see them going into the more senior positions as well, won't we? So I think it's about how we make sure it's not just about numbers, though. It's not just about having more people in those jobs. It's about creating culture change and sort of doing things differently, finding new ways of doing things, isn't it? And using everybody's talents and skills to think about the way forward.
Yeah. I think that we are quite lucky in the sense of being in 2021 and having the sort of decades of change from the 60s onwards that have helped shape especially Western culture's view about women. And I just wondered if there's any women who have influenced you throughout that sort of time period, whether it be from like the suffragettes in the 1920s to more recently, and who are your female heroes, considering it is International Women's Day after all?
Yeah, I know. I have thought about this actually, and I think I've got to be honest. My kind of biggest heroes are within my family, and I think that's because I've got a strong line of female role models. So my mum was a very strong, calm woman, and she had a role for the first kind of 50 years of her life, which was about being a mum and being a wife and things like that. But then when she was in her early 50s, she went to university and retrained, and she kind of did a job for the last 10, 12 years of her life, kind of thing, that made a difference to her. She had a very strong sense of community about values and how about making sure people feel like they belong and safe. And I think that really kind of stuck with me in terms of how I grew up, but also what I hope that I want to bring in work. Helping people to feel like we're building that community is really important, and people feel like they belong to something that's bigger than them. Kind of, they're part of that. And the other, I've got a sort of equally strong sister who's, really, sort of in the last few years married to a woman, which is not something she would have been able to do years ago. And, and my daughter is just amazing. She's 22 and keeps me on my toes in my thinking. It's brilliant to have somebody who we can debate with and just thinking about what the future looks like. And I think that, what I enjoy is thinking about actually her future, and maybe, if she has children, their future, and how different that will be compared to where we've come from, I think, and some of the big changes that people have made in time. And there are some brilliant women and young women, aren't there, that have, Greta Thunberg and people like that, who are just amazing, I think, really championing what they passionately believe in. I saw one of the stories recently about Gina Martin. Have you heard of her? And the kind of all the upskirting kind of changes that she made, which is just, I think that's a real passion that somebody's got, isn't it, to be able to take that on. And that is about equality and fairness as well. Who would your heroes be? Have you got any?
I'm very much the same as you. My mum is one of my biggest heroes. She's also physically disabled as well as me, and she's been a massive champion throughout all my time within the hospital, but also with other things, with school and all that sort of stuff, and making sure that I've got all the things that I should be getting and fighting my corner. And that has instilled a drive in me that I don't think I would have had if I didn't have such a powerful sort of maternal figure in my life who was very disability friendly and open and feminine and an ardent feminist. I wouldn't be the sort of person that I am today. And then also, like your mum, she went into education, higher education later on in life, and she's got a BA and MA and a postgrad qualification, and she's just amazing, and it's inspired me to know that I can do that if she's done it. And I've seen her do it, and I've gone to lectures in my onesie when I was a toddler and sat in on them and listened, and it's been really enlightening having those sorts of people in your lives. And again, I must say a lot of my old sort of neurologist consultant, a lady called Val Harpin, was my neurologist when I was a toddler, and she was so empowering to me, even from when I was very small. Dr. Yinka, who's my neurologist now, again, another really prominent female character in my life that has sort of carried on. And I could list all my nurses that I've had over the years as well, but would be here all day. Yeah. But anybody who has looked after me in that sort of sense and has helped me, I always am internally grateful for them, because they've helped shape me in one way or another, even if it was just one appointment.
Yeah, oh, that's amazing. And just listening to you, Ruthie, you must be an inspiration to so many other people as well, because I think, what I said earlier about going beyond what people think you're capable of, you're pushing the boundaries of that, aren't you? And that's just brilliant to hear, and will be inspirational to many other people as well. Yeah.
Well, I think also, and I'm just throwing it in because it's another Ruth to talk about, because is I want to do a law degree at some point. And I feel like somebody that I've sort of looked up to in researching my law degree is Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who was obviously a Supreme Court judge. And it was watching the movie about her life, the sort of memoir movie that came out a couple of years ago, and reading all the documentaries and her bibliography and how she fought for equality in the US was just amazing. And it's something that I want to, again, channel into my career when I get there.
Yeah,
so
that's amazing. Yeah.
Women, International Women's Day isn't just about championing people like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who have made waves massively in legal, political, medical fields, but it's also about thinking about those that are closer to home and that perhaps seem insignificant to a general worldview, but in personal life they can have such an impact.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I'd really agree with that. And I think, wonderful to have another Ruth that there's not many Ruths or Ruthies around, actually. So, wonderful to have another Ruth that is inspirational as well. And she really represented such an amount of progress with regard to equal rights, didn't she? But I think you're right. I think, it's how privileged are we now to have those international people that we can know more about because of just social media and understanding that, but also people close to home, and it's wonderful to hear about your mum as well, because actually I think it does make a big difference, in terms of kind of growing and nurturing strong women who do feel able to choose to challenge and do feel able to kind of have their view and be confident in that. And I think as things change with equality for transgender, I think there's a lot more of that to come, isn't there?
Yeah.
Mm.
And sort of my last sort of point of written question is, what does the future of women look like within the NHS? But also, do you have any advice for any people that want to either move into senior leadership roles within the NHS or thinking about the NHS as a workplace, whether regardless of what that role is, and what you think of that and what your advice would be to them?
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, I think the future looks really bright. I think that for anybody working in the NHS, male or female, it's a hard place to be, hard jobs, but so satisfying and rewarding. And I think it is a bright place. I think that for women, it's going to continue to be a challenge. There are struggles. It's different for women, I think, who want to work their way through to become more senior, but so much more different to the past. We're in a much better place to be able to progress now compared to what things will have been like previously. And it will keep getting better for future generations because we've got more, forward thinking. Your generation, my daughter's generation, will be in a completely different place again, won't you, in 20, 30, 40 years' time, which would be brilliant. I think my advice for any women who are wanting to progress, and particularly into senior roles, is about making sure you kind of really understand yourself, what you're passionate about, what are the things that really drive you and that you want to make a difference for. Because if you hold that close to your heart, then actually, nobody can question that. And it helps, I think, to build your own self-confidence and belief that what you know to be true is what you want to take forward into the world. And I think as long as you do that with an open mind, and that you're able to have good discussions and conversations with people, and grow in how you're thinking about things, then I think that will stand you in good stead. And I think there's nothing sort of stronger as well than having really good relationships and networks with people. You need those safe spaces, don't you, to be able to go and chat to people and say, well, I don't know what I think about this, but keeping on talking things through is really valuable as well. So I think having really kind of strong self-belief, self-knowledge that actually can do things, and having a really good network of people around you and your relationships, friends and family and others that inspire you as well, will stand you in good stead, and yeah, be good kind of in terms of how you could work within the NHS or anywhere really.
Yeah.
What would you think about if you were kind of offering your advice to if you imagined in kind of 20, 30 years time, where would you hope to be at that point, and what do you think would help you get to that?
Well, I think that although I don't want to work within the NHS and I want to go into sort of the legal sector, I feel that the ability of knowing how far to push yourself before then taking a break and then pushing yourself again, it's not about just because you are a woman you have to go 1,000 times faster than everyone else to get somewhere. It's all about that pacing yourself to then be able to not seem like you are trying to fight all the inequality at once, even, because that will never work and you'll just burn yourself out. I feel that that's quite important, and I think that as we are, hopefully in my career, those sort of barriers will sort of slowly fall away at the wayside, but it's going to be, you need to have that momentum and that change to start off with, but know that that momentum can't keep on going, and that you need to be able to pace yourself with it, because otherwise you're just going to burn yourself out before you can reach a goal.
Yeah, and I think I'd really agree with that. And I think that to do that, you do have to have that level of self-confidence that that's okay, don't you? And
Yeah.
and that you're not missing out on something or an opportunity, or yeah, and like you say, that I'm sure that will change in time. But yeah, it's a really good way of thinking.
Because I think that especially for women, imposter syndrome is quite a prevalent sort of feeling, and therefore I think anything that can combat that sort of mentality, especially, I'm sure you felt it at the level that you're working. I feel it when I'm in a classroom and I'm surrounded by male peers sometimes, and I put my hand up and ask a question,
Yeah,
or I say something and they look at me a bit weird. I'm sure you felt it across multiple jobs that you've done.
yeah.
I feel that anything that can sort of reassure yourself from that state of mind is very good.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I'd agree with that. I think, yeah, I've definitely felt that. I think I'm sure many, if not all, women have felt that, and some men maybe as well. But I think, I have experienced many meetings where I am the only woman in the room, and it does make you feel different, doesn't it? If you're a bit like you, and in lectures or a classroom, it does make you feel different, and it's having that confidence, isn't it, to be able to say what you want to say and to contribute. And that's why, as I say, that diversity of thought, is so important, isn't it, to actually want to have more people so that you can really have good conversations and thought about what we want to do or whatever you're discussing. Yeah. Fantastic. That's brilliant. Is there any in terms of the things that you would chat about with your friends, what are the kind of key things do you think that, any of us ought to be considering? Are there things that you think we ought to be sort of thinking differently or more about that we're not doing at the moment? Or that you would want from me, say, in my role, what would your ask of me be?
I think that I don't know, like, I'm trying to think, actually, you put me on the spot there. You know that sort of words.
That's all right. There might not be anything, Ruthie.
I'm trying to think. I think that, like, the idea of sort of the segregated sort of nurses are women, doctors are men type mentality, and I know that I was born in the early 2000s, so therefore that was still quite a gender stereotyped type of sort of era compared to kids now. I know I've got friends that have got kids that dress up in tutus and whatever they want to dress up into,
Yeah.
which is great, and I find it hilarious. But I wonder whether or not what your role is doing to try and stamp out those gender roles at recruitment level and things like that, because obviously a lot of nurses are still female, a lot of doctors are still men, and I feel that that's sort of the visual of that rather than the sort of meaning behind that is quite projective of sort of the view that's still clinging on, if you get what I mean.
I do know what you mean, yeah. And I think there's lots of things we can do. So we really consciously try and make sure that the images we're using, for example, are ones that don't fall into those stereotypes. We do lots of things like when we do interviews, making sure that people have got the information that they need, but not necessarily that then kind of informs them or takes them down a track that is, you know, just about recruiting. So if you're unconsciously biased towards, you know, any particular gender or colour or whatever it might be, then I think, you know, those sorts of tools help us to try and do something differently. I think the other thing that we are looking at and do more and more of is active recruitment into other areas as well. So, and that's something that we're looking at certainly within the board where I work, you know, the trust board. We've been looking more and more at how we make that more diverse, which is really good in terms of our progress as well. So it'll stand Sheffield Children's in good stead as we move forward. So fantastic. Thank you ever so much, Ruthie. It's a really nice way to spend a Friday afternoon chatting to you.
It's been lovely speaking to you.